Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. How does an HOA even think it can block a working farm's only equipment route, combines, semis, everything, because it's an eyesore? They called it a boundary improvement. I called the sheriff, then got an email that changed everything. What do you think he admitted in writing? So I've been going back and forth about posting this for a while because it's a long one. And the whole thing still makes me a little annoyed even though it ended about as well as it possibly could have. Enough people in my area have heard pieces of it that I figured I'd just put the whole thing out there so at least one version of it is accurate. Quick background on me and the farm. My grandfather bought the land, my dad expanded it, and I've been running it full-time for about 12 years now. It's roughly 400 acres of row crops, mostly corn and soybeans. Not a hobby, not a side project. It's my livelihood, my family's livelihood, and the income for the 3 guys who work seasonally with me. The farm is basically split into 2 sections that I call the North Fields and the South Fields, and that split is the whole reason this story exists. A few years back, the land directly east of my South Fields sold. The previous owner had used it for hay and light cattle grazing, total non-issue for a neighbor. When I found out it sold to a developer, I wasn't thrilled, but I wasn't panicked either. What got built was one of those cookie-cutter subdivisions where every house looks like it was copied from the same catalog page and pasted slightly differently on each lot. Same shades of gray and beige, same 2-car garages, same little rectangle of sod out front, same ornamental shrubbery at the mailbox. And with it came an HOA that was, from the very beginning, aggressive in the specific way that HOAs get when they're being run by someone who has a lot of free time and a very serious need to feel important. Within the first 6 months of the neighborhood being occupied, I had gotten 2 letters from the HOA about my grain bins being visually disruptive to the residential character of the community, and 1 letter about the smell during fertilizer application. None of these letters had any legal weight. My farm predates the subdivision by about 60 years, and state agricultural protection statutes are pretty clear about not requiring farmers to alter normal operations because a subdivision moved in next door. I didn't respond to any of the letters. I filed them. The HOA president was a retired guy who had clearly spent his career being important somewhere and was now redirecting that same energy into governing 200 suburban homes. He drove a golf cart around the perimeter of the subdivision every morning. He wore polo shirts every single day, regardless of the temperature. He had made it known through my neighbor who lives on the road between our properties that he considered the farm incompatible with the neighborhood and intended to pursue every available avenue. I didn't take that very seriously at first. A lot of people say things like that and nothing comes of it. But here is what you need to understand before the rest of this makes sense. Running along the eastern edge of my South Fields, right where my property meets the subdivision boundary line, there is a farm road. Unpaved, compacted gravel and dirt about 14 feet wide. That road has been there since before I was born. It runs from the county road at the north end down to a gate at the south end. And it is the only access road on that side of the farm with enough width and clearance to accommodate my larger equipment. When I say larger equipment, I do mean large. A combine harvester, folded for road transport, runs close to 14 feet wide and about 13 feet tall. You cannot run that machine through a standard gate or down a narrow residential-style lane. The farm road is that width specifically because my dad had it graded and maintained over the years to handle combines and the other big equipment. Beyond the combine, I get regular 18-wheeler deliveries of seed, fertilizer, and agricultural chemicals into the Southfield storage area, and those trucks need a clear, wide, straight approach to back in properly. Without that road, accessing the Southfields with heavy machinery means routing completely around the north end of the farm on county roads, which adds 40 minutes minimum per trip and in some cases isn't even possible depending on the class of road and the equipment involved. That road, and the strip of land it sits on, is deeded to me. My property line runs along the east side of it. There is no shared use, no easement agreement with anyone else, no public access element. It's mine. It has been maintained by my family at our expense for decades, and I have never given the subdivision, the HOA, or any of their residents any permission to use it, cross it, or do anything on it whatsoever. So, planting season. If you don't farm, you might not fully appreciate what planting season means in terms of timing pressure. There's a window, and the window is not flexible or forgiving. Miss it by too much, and your yield takes a hit that shows up in your income for the entire year. The spring I'm talking about, I had a delivery scheduled that had been in coordination for 2 months. A truckload of seed corn and a separate tanker of starter fertilizer arriving the same morning, timed to work around my seed dealer's schedule because he was servicing 3 other farms that same week and the logistics were tight. The combined value of what was coming was around $38,000. The plan was for both trucks to come down the farm road through the south gate and back up to the storage area near my equipment shed. I drove down to the south gate that morning to unlock it and make sure the approach was clear before the trucks arrived. I had about 2 hours before they were due. I came around the last bend in the road where you can see the gate, and I just stopped the truck. I sat there for a second because what I was looking at genuinely did not register at first. There was a fence across my road, not a temporary barrier, not orange construction netting, not a couple of sawhorses, a finished, fully installed wrought iron and brick fence. The posts were set in concrete that was still noticeably newer than the surrounding soil. The ironwork between the brick pillars was decorative, painted matte black, the exact same style as the fencing you see around the entrance monuments at the subdivision. Someone had poured concrete footings, constructed brick pillars, hung wrought iron fence panels, and done it all on my farm road on my property at some point in the past couple of weeks while I had been working the north end of the farm and not checking the south gate regularly. There was a small sign bolted to one of the iron panels. It said something about a community boundary and unauthorized vehicles. I got out, walked up to it, confirmed it was solid and professional and permanent, walked back to my truck and called the non-emergency line for the county sheriff's department. I explained that someone had built a fence on my private property without any permission and that I had a commercial delivery arriving in under 2 hours that was now blocked. While I was still on the phone with the dispatcher, I heard a golf cart coming up the road behind me. The HOA president parked it a little ways back and walked up with his hands in his pockets and the body language of a man who was extraordinarily pleased with himself. I told the dispatcher I'd call back if needed and hung up. I asked him if he knew anything about the fence. He said he did, in fact, because he had arranged for it to be installed. He said it without hesitation or apology, like he was announcing something he expected to be praised for. He told me the road was an eyesore, that the farm trucks were alarming to residents, that children in the neighborhood were frightened by heavy equipment, and that the HOA board had voted and approved the fence as a boundary improvement project. He said all of this with the calm confidence of someone who had not once in his life been in a situation where the HOA rules didn't solve the problem for him. I told him the road was my private property and the fence needed to come down immediately. He told me I was mistaken and that the road clearly ran along the community boundary and had always functioned as a shared access point. I told him I had my deed in the truck and could walk him through the property lines right now. He waved that off and said the HOA had done their due diligence, that their people had reviewed it, and that I should figure out another way to access my fields. Then he called me a stubborn dirt farmer. Then he got back in his golf cart and left. The delivery trucks arrived about 90 minutes later while I was still standing there waiting for the deputy. The first driver pulled up behind my truck, climbed out, looked at the fence, and immediately called his dispatcher. I called my seed dealer at the same time. The conversation with both of them over the next 30 minutes went about how you'd expect. Both trucks had to turn around. The delivery had to be rescheduled. Because the delay was technically on my end under the terms of the delivery contract, the rescheduling fee came out of my pocket. $1,500. The next available date was 6 days out, which wasn't going to destroy the season but wasn't comfortable either. It meant my window was going to be tight. The deputy showed up, walked the fence, looked at my deed, which I had retrieved from the glove box of my truck, and agreed with me that this appeared to be unauthorized construction on private property. He told me not to attempt to remove the fence myself, which I already knew and had already decided. He also mentioned that he had passed the subdivision entrance on his way in and that the fence style clearly matched the neighborhood's existing features, which confirmed this was a deliberate, planned installation and not some kind of mistake or third-party encroachment. I want to be clear about why I didn't just hook a chain to that fence and pull it out with my truck, because I thought about it. The reason is simple. If I touch that fence, even though it's illegally on my property, I give them a property damage claim. Suddenly I'm on defense instead of them. I've watched enough neighbor disputes in my county to know how that plays out, so I drove home and started making calls. The next morning, I had a professional land surveyor out at first light. He spent close to 3 hours on the south end of the property doing a full boundary survey with GPS equipment and referencing the county plat records. By early afternoon, I had a formal signed and sealed report with coordinates, measurements, and bright pink stakes driven into the ground at every boundary point. The fence was sitting approximately 8 feet inside my property line. Every post, every brick pillar, every panel of ironwork. All of it was on my land. I photographed every pink stake with the fence clearly visible in the background. I photographed the sign. I photographed the concrete footings. I photographed everything. That evening, I sent the HOA president an email. Short, factual, no emotional language. I told him the professional survey confirmed the fence was entirely on my private property. I had attached the survey report, and I was giving him 24 hours to begin removal of the structure at the HOA's expense. I mentioned that I had incurred documented financial damages from the delivery delay and would be seeking reimbursement for those as a minimum. His response came back within the hour, and I have to tell you, when I read it, I put my phone down on the kitchen table and sat very still for a moment because I genuinely could not process what I was looking at. He responded from his official HOA president email account, which meant it was a formal HOA communication. He told me the survey was self-serving, stated the HOA stood by their decision, said the fence was not coming down, and then claimed the road had historically functioned as a community access point. He then explained that the fence had been installed to protect the residential character of the neighborhood from farm-related nuisances, and called it a necessary community investment funded through the boundary improvement line of the HOA budget. He had just put in writing from an official HOA account that the organization had used member funds to deliberately construct a permanent structure on my private property, that he was personally responsible for it, and that they had no intention of removing it. Admission of authorization, admission of intent, admission of the funding source, all in one email. I forwarded it to my printer, made 3 copies, and called a property attorney that same night. The attorney I ended up with handles agricultural and rural property disputes specifically, which is a real specialty area because farming throws up issues that general real estate attorneys sometimes don't know how to handle. Easements, mineral rights, drainage rights, access road disputes, nuisance claims against farms. He's seen all of it. I brought him the deed, the surveyor's report, every photograph, the rescheduling invoices, the history of HOA letters I had been filing for 2 years, and the full email chain. He went through everything at his desk while I sat across from him, and by the time he got to the email, he got a very specific look on his face that I interpreted as professionally excited. What he drafted was a cease and desist combined with a formal notice of civil liability. The structure of it was this. The HOA had committed trespass by constructing a permanent structure on my private property without consent or legal authority. They were actively obstructing a functioning commercial agricultural operation, which carries specific weight under state agricultural protection statutes. Beginning from the date the fence was confirmed to be on my property by professional survey, the HOA was being assessed $2,000 per day for documented business interruption and loss of agricultural access. If the fence was not completely removed by a licensed contractor within 48 hours of receipt of the notice, I would engage my own commercial demolition crew, bill the full cost plus a markup to the HOA, and file suit for all damages including attorney fees, demolition costs, planting delay losses, and the daily assessments that had accrued. The letter cited specific chapter and section references for every legal claim, pulled directly from county property records and state property and agricultural codes. My attorney also coordinated with the county sheriff's department to have a deputy present when we delivered the documents. As it turned out, the other HOA board members had already called an emergency meeting when word got around that there was a lawsuit coming, so we had a place to deliver everything. I went to that meeting with the deputy. My attorney wasn't there in person, but had walked me through exactly what to do and say. I walked in, handed the formal documents to the board, and waited while they read. The HOA president started trying to explain his position and got about 2 sentences out before another board member cut him off and asked directly whether it was true that he had represented the road as a shared or public access route when he proposed the fence project to the board. He pivoted to talking about community benefit and got cut off again. The deputy, when one of the board members asked him point blank, confirmed that my deed had been reviewed, that the fence was on my private property, and that my legal right to pursue civil remedies was clear. That room got very quiet. What came out over the next several minutes was that the HOA president had gone to the board with the fence proposal and told them the road was essentially a neighborhood boundary road, that fencing it would simply formalize an existing line and that it was a routine improvement. He had not told them the road was on my private deed. He had not told them I had any legal claim to it. He had gotten board approval by misrepresenting the basic facts of the situation. I could see exactly when the rest of the board understood what that meant for them personally as board members who had voted to approve a trespass. They asked me to step out while they talked among themselves. I stood in the parking lot with the deputy for about 15 minutes. When they called me back in, the HOA president was sitting off to the side and was no longer running the meeting. One of the other board members told me they would remove the fence and asked whether I would pause the daily damage assessment while removal was in progress. I told them the 48-hour clock I had given them was running, and that as long as the fence was completely gone within that window, with all concrete footings properly removed and the soil restored, I would not pursue the per-day assessments beyond what had already accumulated. They agreed. The HOA could not get their original contractor back on short notice. The company was booked out and wasn't interested in an emergency callback for a job they hadn't expected to be reversing. So the HOA had to hire an emergency crew through a general demolition contractor at after-hours emergency rates, which in my experience runs somewhere between double and triple standard pricing depending on the job. That crew showed up the following morning around 7 and spent most of the day cutting fence panels, jackhammering the concrete footings out of the ground, removing the brick pillars, loading everything into a hauling truck, and backfilling the holes. I found out later through the paperwork that came out of the settlement that the removal bill came to somewhere around $7,500. I sat in a lawn chair about 30 feet away with a thermos of coffee and watched the whole thing, not to rub it in, or not entirely. Mostly because my surveyor had told me that improperly removed concrete footings cause drainage and compaction problems, and I wanted to confirm with my own eyes that the holes were being properly backfilled and compacted. The board member who came out to supervise the crew kept his eyes on the workers the entire time and didn't once look over at me. I understood that completely. The full financial picture of what happened to the HOA became clearer over the following weeks through the settlement negotiations. The original fence installation had cost approximately $18,000 out of their community fund. Emergency removal was close to $7,500. My attorney fees through the cease and desist and demand stage came to just under $4,000, which the HOA paid as part of the settlement. The $1,500 rescheduling fee was reimbursed in full. The surveyor cost was covered. When you add it all together, the HOA spent somewhere between $32,000 and $35,000 on a fence that stood for less than 3 weeks and that they were ultimately forced to destroy on their own dime. Their reserves, from what I heard through people in the area who know homeowners in that neighborhood, had been sitting around $40,000 going into this. They were effectively wiped out. The board had to issue a special assessment to every homeowner in the neighborhood just to get the fund back to a minimally functional level. From what I understand, that did not go over well at all. The HOA president did not make it through the fallout. The board held a formal removal vote about 6 weeks after the fence came down. Before that, there had been a broader neighborhood meeting where he tried to explain and justify his decisions, and from what I heard through the people I know, things got pretty heated. The board also pursued him personally under the HOA's own bylaws for misrepresenting material facts to get board approval for the project, which resulted in him having to pay a personal portion of the special assessment tied specifically to the costs that stemmed from his misrepresentation. I don't know the exact number, but the word I heard was substantial. My farm road got repaired within a week. We compacted the disturbed sections, added a fresh layer of gravel through the area where the footings had been, and it was back in service in good shape. The rescheduled delivery came through without any issues. Planting season was tight, but we made it well within the viable window and the south fields went in on a reasonable schedule. And then I did the last thing. Once everything was settled and the road was restored, I installed my own barrier at the property line. Galvanized steel cattle panel gate, the heavy agricultural kind that ranchers use for livestock operations. Steel T-posts driven 2 feet into the ground. Standard agricultural barbed wire on treated wood posts running along the line in both directions from the gate. It is functional, practical, completely code compliant, and it looks exactly like what it is, which is a working farm boundary fence. I put up a no trespassing sign, the large, bright yellow kind with bold black lettering, positioned to face directly into the subdivision. Violators will be prosecuted. My attorney's office number is on it. The HOA sent one letter after the installation asking if I would consider a more aesthetically compatible fencing option that better suited the visual character of the surrounding area. My attorney replied in a single sentence confirming the installation was fully within my property rights and that no further correspondence on the subject was required or welcome. Yields on the South Fields that year were decent. Nothing record-breaking, but solidly within normal range. The spring fertilizer application was particularly potent due to some weather conditions that held the smell close to the ground for longer than usual. I've been told it was noticeable in the subdivision for about a week and a half. I wouldn't know personally. I was busy working. The next one is an entitled people story. After my sister was evicted from the family property, she went to live with her crappy best friend, who eventually kicked her out too. After that, she started living with her abusive boyfriend, who was also her drug dealer. This guy was messed up in the head and had a horrible temper, but he was also smart in a sketchy way. He fixed up and resold cars despite legally being on disability. The first time I met him, I could tell he was two-faced, and I wanted to stay as far away from him as possible. Then one day, my sister called me crying. Her boyfriend had stranded her and her puppy in an unlivable camper trailer on the side of the road. He was also holding her other two dogs, her cat, and the title to a car she had bought from him hostage. He did leave her with another car, but it was a beat-up Volvo that did not even run properly. He had also smashed out the rear window with a hammer during one of his rage fits. My sister called the police, but they basically told her that since it was his property, there was not much they could do about him breaking it. I came running to help her after she called, even after all the years she had made me utterly miserable. Her boyfriend's parents came to help too, because even they knew he was unstable. Together, we managed to load all my sister's stuff into my truck. The problem was that my sister has no sense of what to get rid of when she is forced to downsize, so my F-150 was packed almost to the roof. After that, we had to go back to her boyfriend's apartment to get her pets and the car title. The guy had apparently picked the lock on my sister's safe and stolen the title out of it. Of course, he repeatedly denied it with a smug grin on his face and tried to gaslight her the entire time. He and my sister spent about an hour shouting back and forth at each other, and it was dark by the time it was over. My sister threatened to call the cops unless he returned the title. He kept denying that he had it, but she knew enough about his life to cause him real problems if the police got involved. Once he realized she was not backing down, he stormed back up to his apartment. Then, when my sister was not looking, he ran back outside, threw an envelope through the window of my truck onto the passenger seat, and ran back inside. It was the car title. If I had not seen him do it, I am sure he would have tried to claim it had been there the whole time. I have no idea if she confronted him about it later. I never got the chance to find out. My sister had to stay with her boyfriend's sister, who was a single mom with 2 kids and another one on the way. I had to drive my sister there, and she barely looked up from her phone to give me directions unless I forced her to. Every time I needed to make a turn, she would wait until the last second to tell me, then get irritated when I asked for directions. After we unloaded all her stuff, she begged me to take her cat home with me. I did. That cat was so happy to come back here because he had been raised on our property. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, he could smell where we were from inside his carrier. He went from nervous meowing to loud purring almost instantly. When I let him out, he ran around the yard like he had finally come home. Since then, I have had him chipped and registered in my name, because if I let my sister take him back, she would drag him right back into some drug-filled mess. My sister lasted barely 2 days at her boyfriend's sister's place. The two of them were already at each other's throats because my sister is impossible to live with. On top of that, she let her dogs pee and poop all over the bedroom floor and did not clean up any of it. I had to clean it when I got there. Around the same time, her boyfriend managed to get the crappy Volvo running for her, only to grab her by the hair when she tried to leave. She had to floor it to get away from him, and it ripped out a chunk of her hair. I met up with her, and we packed my truck and the Volvo full of her junk. Then I spent the entire day driving around with her while she tried to find someone to take her in. The problem was that she had burned through almost every friendship she ever had. Very few people even responded to her. She even dragged me to a produce farm where some workers lived out of campers, but they were not willing to take her in either. During all of this, I was the only one walking her 3 pugs. She barely got out of her car to do anything. let alone help. Even when her phone died and had to charge, she still did not help. If I got mad at her, she would start crying and acting pathetic because of her situation. Then she came up with one of her dumbest excuses yet. She claimed she had split personalities and that was why she was so mean to people for no reason. I did not even bother correcting her because she does not listen. She was diagnosed bipolar as a teenager and mentally blocked it out. She is also more than likely a narcissist. I have known her my entire life and she has always been cruel and self-important. Add alcohol and drugs on top of that, and she has completely lost touch with reality. Just not in the way she thinks. She does not show the symptoms most people would associate with split personalities. She does not identify by different names or different people. She does not lose memory during personality shifts. She just convinced herself she had split personalities because it gave her another excuse. I really wish I was making this up, but all of this actually happened. After following her from place to place for several hours while she failed to find anywhere to stay, we ended up parked in front of a convenience store near the road that leads home. Home for me, anyway. Not for her anymore. She is not allowed on the property at all. We sat there for hours while she called and messaged people trying to find someone who would take her in. Nobody did. What made it worse was that I found out her cell phone plan was about to be cut off for non-payment because the plan was through her boyfriend. After that, she would only be able to message me through social media whenever she had Wi-Fi. While we were parked in front of the convenience store, my sister drove me even more insane with her entitlement. At one point, I asked her if she was thirsty and she said yes. So I went inside and bought her a big bottle of cold water. She was not grateful. She was mad that it was not beer. Then she wanted me to go back inside and buy her beer. I told her I was not going to help her drink and drive, and she berated me before angrily ignoring me for a while. She did not even drink the water I bought her. On a hunch, I asked her to pop the hood of the Volvo because the engine sounded rough. I checked the oil and there was almost none in it. I looked up what type of oil the car needed and went back into the convenience store. $8 for a quart of oil just so the engine would not seize up. Then I asked how much gas she had. The car was not only on empty, the fuel warning light had already come on. I was furious and she had waited until that moment to tell me. I had no choice but to buy her gas. That was when she told me the car only took premium fuel. Fan-freaking-tastic. I pulled $20 out of my wallet and told her to go get gas at the nearby station. I told her very clearly that the money was for gas only, no beer. She started crying and actually said, "Can't I just get one beer?" I said no. She tried to beg, but I refused. It was my money and it was for gas. I figured she would buy beer anyway, but she actually did what she was told. She went and got the gas, then came back acting nice, although she was clearly still upset that I would not buy her alcohol. I called our parents on speaker to update them. Our mother was worried out of her mind, but our parents still refused to let my sister come back home after everything she had put us and her kids through. That is a long story on its own. I knew that if we let her come back, even just for a night, she would plant herself in my camper trailer and refuse to leave. So I told my parents in advance that my sister would not be staying in my camper. My mother admitted that she had wanted to suggest it for a night or two, but she realized I had already had enough and did not ask. While we were on the phone, our mother started talking about how furious she was at my sister's boyfriend for putting his hands on her. She also started talking about getting my sister a motel room for the night. Meanwhile, my sister was losing her mind in her car. She has to make our mother the villain in her life. She cannot function unless she has someone to blame and hate. During her tantrum, she was flailing her arms and making incoherent noises. I kept trying to shush her without letting our mother hear, but my sister just glared at me, rolled up her window, and sat there pouting. My sister kept refusing to let our mother book a motel room. She started yelling that there was no way a motel would let her bring 3 dogs and that our mother already knew that. No, our mother did not know that. She was literally just trying to help. By this point, it was getting dark and I needed to go home. I called my parents back and they agreed that I could bring my sister's stuff home with me for the moment, but it all had to stay in my truck. I had no choice but to leave my sister to spend the night in her awful car. Then my sister started digging furiously through the back of my truck looking for her dog food. She could not find it, so I had to go back into the convenience store and buy her a $12 bag of dog food. After I handed it to her, she suddenly said, "She's going to die, you know." I just stared at her and said, "What?" Then she told me our mother was going to die. She went on a rant about how her previous boyfriend died after cheating on her, and how the woman he had cheated with died soon after in an unrelated incident. My sister said everyone who crosses her dies, and that our mother would be next. I was horrified, and I got out of there. I told my parents exactly what she said, and they were horrified too. As for my sister, she drove that terrible Volvo all the way back to her boyfriend's apartment and spent the night parked there. Her boyfriend started scaring her by riding around the apartment complex on his motorcycle, circling her car and watching her like a vulture. Later that night, my sister messaged me through social media saying he was coming for her. He had already threatened her earlier and she was terrified. She said she heard gunshots and started texting me like it was her last moment on Earth. I was ready to call the police, but she refused and said they were completely useless. Near morning, she texted me again and said everything was fine and that the gunshots were unrelated. Then, just to be cruel, her boyfriend stabbed one of the Volvo's tires and she had to put on the spare. Our mother got in touch with her and managed to get her a motel room for the night. My sister was not very appreciative and the motel put my poor mother through a nightmare over the phone because they did not want to book the room without physically holding her credit card. They made her jump through who knows how many hoops just to get it done. And guess what? My sister spent the night in that motel room with all 3 dogs, so apparently motels can allow it. She never apologized. The next day, when my sister had to leave the motel, she went right back to her boyfriend's place. Then she messaged me and told me to bring her stuff back there. After all of that chaos, after all those days, she ended up right back where she started. I was furious, and so were my parents. I drove back to the boyfriend's apartment angry the entire way, rehearsing a speech in my head about exactly what I was going to say to her. When I got there, my 40-year-old sister was dressed like a teenager in tiny shorts, a tube top, and a sideways ponytail. It did not suit her. Years of drugs had aged her badly, and she looked like someone who was one bad decision away from being on a police body cam video. Her boyfriend was there the entire time, and I did not want to risk setting him off by yelling at her in front of him. So I unloaded her stuff as fast as I could, then I gave her some money because I knew she had nothing to her name, told her not to contact us until she got help, and turned to leave. The last thing I heard her say was, "Rehab?" She sounded genuinely confused, like she had no idea why I would say that. I drove off to get yellow curry from one of my favorite restaurants, and she immediately started messaging me, begging me not to ignore her. Then she actually said she did not know she was such a burden on everyone. Seriously? She knew. She has always known. She just lives in denial and acts like the main character in every disaster she creates. I blocked her that day and it was an incredible relief. She called our parents later, and our mother told her she had probably lost me for good. The only time I have let her talk to me recently was because she wanted her mail. My sister still managed to come back and weasel more money out of us later. I went out to eat with my parents and she showed up at the restaurant in tears. She got $50 from our dad and $20 from me. At that point, we were pretty sure the money was going straight into her habits. Before we kicked her out, she had already been borrowing money from me, even though she owed me hundreds. She also owed our parents and grandparents thousands. She gave me that classic line, "You know I'm good to pay you back." She was not even feeding her children properly, let alone paying her mortgage. Her ex-husband eventually took the kids and refused to let her see them as long as her abusive boyfriend was around. Then her boyfriend ended up going back to prison, and somehow my sister has been living off his disability money and got an apartment of her own. She also started dumpster diving and apparently found jewelry that she sold to a pawn shop. Recently, my sister showed up at my house wanting her cat back. We got into a shouting match and I kicked her off the property. Just days after that, I had the cat chipped and registered in my name. Good lord, this got long. Once I started typing, I just could not stop. Anyway, thank you for watching.